Good morning. Sorry it's taken so long to actually get this podcast together. It's been a busy start of the term, hasn't it? So we've talked about this already, and we've sort of moving on to chapter 6 already, but at the moment we need to keep our minds over homeostasis and those basics you took up from year 11. And as I said, the chief examiner hates me teaching about homeostasis, but of course it is the basis of what we're talking about here, and a knowledge of that's important. So we had this wonderful discussion. It took quite a while, but hopefully it's starting to really come into your minds now. We're looking at three environments. There's the environment external to the whole living organism. There's the environment within the living organism, so beyond my my skin, inside there, past that wonderful epithelial sheet that's protecting me. And then there's the intracellular. So we have an environment within each cell, an environment bathing the cells that connect cells together, and then an environment outside the organism. And of course the slide suggests some possibilities there. And we've also had a conversation about how in many ways, we're a great big donut. There's that hole that starts at the mouth and comes out the other end. And that's really an external environment within our organism. And it's the same for our respiratory tract, our urogenital tracts. They're actually external environments. And that'll become interesting when we start talking about diseases in the next part of the area of study. All living things, no matter how small they are, they've got a lovely little photograph there of some diatoms and things under a microscope. And there's always lovely fish in the field and that lovely swimming mountain, all lovely views. All those living things are desperately trying to remain within normal ranges for all sorts of bits and pieces, and they all do it differently. So all those adaptations you studied last year in biology are about maintaining homeostasis, finding ways to ensure that we, in fact, can maintain that relatively stable internal environment for glucose, for water, for carbon dioxide, for oxygen, etc., etc. And we've talked about quite a few of those over the last couple of weeks. So although homeostasis isn't meant to be on the exam, we have seen the examiners ask that question of students, what is homeostasis? So homeostasis is the attempt to maintain a relatively stable internal environment. And that's worth keeping in the back of our heads. Living organisms can survive, grow, and reproduce only in external environments that provide adequate levels of nutrition, water, the ability to exchange gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen, and have suitable physical conditions. And so I talked to you about those six things now. So we have water, we have energy, and that can be nutrition, light, all that sort of things. We're talking about all organisms, not just us. Gas exchange, waste removal, reproduction, cellular level. We'll talk about cell replication. We'll do more of that next term. And of course, replication of the entire animal. And sensing and responding to the environment. And this is this part about sensing and responding to external environments and to the internal environments of our body. So we're looking at all those things that a cell needs for its biochemistry. Maintain the correct pH for enzyme activity, the correct temperature for enzyme activity in different locations. Are the salts we need available for movement across membranes and building other things? The nutrients we need, all the amino acids we need, are they all there within the limits of our body? And of course, sometimes you can have too much. And so people go on high dose vitamin C diets. And often these can be quite damaging if not carefully monitored by their practitioner. And we're highly evolved. Multicellular organism, 10,000 trillion cells, something ridiculous. So our ability to monitor and maintain homeostatic systems within that huge variety of cells is really finely honed. And we have two body systems totally dedicated to that very purpose. I just did that, didn't I? So the classic homeostatic mechanism is described as a stimulus response model. And we see that in the reflex arc. There's a nice picture of a reflex arc just there. So the receptor could be a pain receptor, could be a heat receptor. It receives information from the environment, so it receives the stimulus. That then sends a message along the sensory neuron into the central nervous system, where it's taken through the central nervous system by an interneuron and passed to a motor neuron, and it causes an effector, in this case in the picture a muscle, to contract or expand and create the correct response. And so this is a classic model for how we react to changes in our environment. We're going to look at a much more complex model in the next chapter called signal transduction, because of course things are much more complex than that simple reflex arc we see there. And the reflex arc doesn't require the brain to do much memory or thinking about it. It's just a classic standard involuntary response. Put your hand on a hot plate and you're going to take your hand off if you can feel the heat. We also talk about the idea of negative and positive feedback loops. So a negative feedback loop is a good thing. So we've got to be careful when we're using these words. So negative feedback is a response in the opposite direction of the stimulus to return to an original state, to return to homeostasis. And that diagram there is showing us the process of water control, water regulation. And we talk about the plasma osmolarity of the membranes of our kidneys and things that are able to be adjusted and changed by the application of ADH or removal of ADH so that our kidneys can take up or release more water. We also talk about positive feedback systems, and these generally are catastrophic. So the diagram I got there was an area of interest of mine, of course, in the sense of climate change, and that idea of adding more carbon dioxide all the time creates further and further problems. So we've got a system that keeps resetting norm. We set it in fever in our bodies, and viruses often cause fevers that reset our thermostat, and we set 36 as normal, it becomes 38 for normal, 40 normal, 42 normal, and so obviously we're going to get some catastrophic outcomes. The one interesting positive feedback system that's actually useful is childbirth and the release of chemicals to cause the cervix to become slack and let the baby's head come out, and that needs more and more chemical to cause the cervix to open far enough for a baby's head to move through. And we use a positive feedback system for that one, but that's an unusual example. Most are not good. Now I think this goes into the nervous system. So what I might do now is, because it's halfway through the time for this podcast, is stop this one and then create one on nervous system and endocrine system. So we'll do it in two halves.